This morning we're going to go from 1 Samuel chapter 15. We're going to look at the life of Saul. This is going to be a bad news story, but it's going to be good for us, hopefully, nonetheless. Father, would you help us with this? Receive all that we can out of this in your name. Amen. 1 Samuel chapter 15. So let me just do a little bit of a backdrop here before we read this text. Saul was the very first official king of Israel. So Israel is the people of God prior to Jesus. They were the carriers of the seed, the bloodline that would eventually lead to Jesus, the Savior of the world. And so God had commissioned these people to be his ambassadors, his representatives on the earth, and they didn't do so great. They were called to be a people that were distinct and unique. The Bible word for that is holy. Meaning that out of all the people groups in the world, God chose this people group to be in intimate partnership with, so that through relationship with them, essentially, he'd make the rest of the nations jealous. He would show them just how amazing it is to be in right relation with God, that the nations would so desire it and come running to God as a result. Now, Israel didn't exactly live up to its calling, but Jesus came and fulfilled it eventually for them on their behalf. And one of the unique things about Israel is that they were uniquely called to be in a relationship with God where God would be their king. But as they were living like with God, overwhelmed by their own anxiety, their own selfishness and self-centeredness, instead of being holy and dedicated to God, one of the things that they started to cry out for was a king. They wanted a human king. They didn't just want God as king, they wanted a human king. That somehow there was a sense of security in having a human being sit on a throne over their nation rather than God. And so this was the demand of the people. Now, this was not a great demand. God acquiesced to it, so this is always the regular reminder of be careful what you pray for kind of thing. God answered this prayer, but he wasn't exactly stoked to answer this prayer because he knew how corrupt and fallible human beings are. And once you give a human being the position of king, he knew how exactly that was going to go. It was like all the corruption of the nation was going to get ramped up and embodied in this one person, and all kinds of dynamics were going to go really sideways very, very quickly. But when the people demanded a king, they specifically said the words, "We want a king just like all the other nations have." And this phrase is a haunting phrase. If God is specifically wanting a relationship with a people that is unique and different from all the other nations, and the people's demand is to have a king so that they would become more like all the other nations, you see that God and his people are really, really at odds. And so, God does appoint a king, and the first king is by the name of Saul. And one of the things that we get about Saul that we rarely get in the Bible is a physical description about him. Not a lot of details, but we're told two things. He is tall, which I think is just awesome as a leader. That's great. Second, he's handsome. And so he has all the outward physical signs of someone that people would love to follow. That when you think of handing over that level of sovereign responsibility and authority to one human being, I don't know if height should come into the consideration of qualifications. But you guys, this isn't just a story about them. This is a story about us. And how shallow and superficial and how we put our trust and security in the most fragile, thin ice possible. And this is what happens. They put their trust in a tall man who looks the part, but things don't go well. And I want to talk about the moment where Saul was actually finally rejected as king, and God decided to replace him and his family line with another. And that's what happens here in 1 Samuel chapter 15. This is where it says that Samuel, who was the prophet, the main prophet at the time, said to Saul, "I am the one that the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I'm going to punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go," verse 3, "and attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Don't spare anything among them." So Saul went and summoned the men and mustered an army, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 from Judah. Saul went to the city of Amalek and sent an ambush in the ravine. And then he carries on his mission quite successfully. When Saul attacked the Amalekites all the way from the Havilah to the Shur, nearest the eastern border of Egypt, he took their king, Agag, alive and all his people he totally destroyed with a sword. But Saul and the army spared Agag, and the best of the sheep and cattle. Unlike what God had told him to do, which was destroy everything, he didn't, and he took the best of all the sheep and cattle that they had, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak, they totally destroyed. So this is going to get us started here. Now, I realize to modern ears reading this, there's all kinds of hiccups that we might have here. But one of the things that we have to come to terms with is that when you have relentless evil in the world, at some point, in order to stop it, there's got to be a level of force that comes against it. And God will often use human governments that are corrupt and evil to be challenged by other human governments that even can be corrupt and evil themselves in order to mitigate the level of evil and chaos that they're bringing into the world. If you want to go and do a back study into the Amalekites, who they were, what they were about, and why judgment was coming to them, you could look into the prophets and see a long tale of marauders, violent people that would rape, that would pillage, that would murder, and that were extremely violent and evil. They were demonically infused in their worship, and they just had very little going for them of any redemptive value. And one of the reasons why Saul was specifically commanded not just to confront this level of evil, not just to spare Israel, but even the surrounding nations from them, but commanded to do it in a way where he was not to take anything from them, but to literally put to destruction everything in their nation, is because that is how the Amalekites rolled. In fact, that's not unlike how most nations roll. When most nations go to war, they usually will find the most popular or sort of self-righteous justifications for doing so. But in the end, there's some sort of self-benefit that comes as a result. There's some sort of adding to the treasures or the wealth or the resources or the influence that comes as a result of war. And this is no different with the Amalekites. That all that they've done was just to build themselves up and enhance their own national position. And because not only Saul, but the entire nation of Israel was meant to walk with God as holy and unique and different, not only are they going to be called to put a halt to evil, but to do it in a different way than evil has done. Meaning, they're not going to profit off of this. They're not going to take what the Amalekites would have taken from them. They're not going to do what all the other nations would have done. Their call is to be holy unto the Lord, different, unique, to set a different way and a different example. Now, as much as we could explore all the implications of, for foreign national policy and all that, and how governmental systems should work in the world today based on this, which is all sort of fascinating levels of conversations, as the Bible will often do, it'll take you from the big picture level into the micro level of examining our own hearts, which is exactly what we're going to do when we look into the person of Saul. That when he went to this nation, he obeyed God in the sense that he did go out to stop their evil, and he did defeat them militarily. But he took for himself the best that the Amalekites had. And this is a real problem. So he's about to be confronted by it, and then we're going to get a window into exactly what's going on with him. Let's go to the next verses here. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel, the prophet that had commissioned him in the beginning, saying this, I regret that I ever made Saul king. Now, when God uses the word regret, if you don't have a huge pit in your stomach. Now, some of this is anthropomorphizing. It's the idea of God's expressing himself in terms of human experiential emotions. God is certainly a category above our fullness of understanding. And to say that, well, God didn't have the foresight to see how this would go or wasn't sovereign enough to know maybe this is how Saul would perform. Clearly, the Bible makes the case that God is sovereign. He has foreknowledge. All those things are true. But when the Bible uses words like regret, it's saying there's a deep pain in the inner being of God related to the performance of someone he's appointed for a very special responsibility. Did you know you can disappoint God in a severe way? There has to be a category for that in your life. Then as the word came, he has turned away from me has not carried out my instructions. And because of this, Samuel was angry, and he prayed essentially all night. And early in the morning, he got up and he went out to Saul. But he was told, Son has gone to Carmel. And there he was setting up a monument to his own honor. That's always a good sign. Now, when Samuel reached him, Saul said, The Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions. But Samuel said, What then is this bleating of sheep in my ears? I'm hearing the mooing of cows. What is that? What is this that I'm hearing? Enough, Samuel said to Saul. Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. Tell me, said Saul. Oh, I'm going to tell you, said Samuel. I'm adding that part. Although you were once small in your own eyes, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and he sent you on a mission saying, Go and completely destroy those wicked people, the Amalekites. Wage war against them until you've wiped them out. Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord? Verse 20, But I did obey, said Saul. I went on the mission. I completely destroyed the Amalekites. I brought back their king. But the soldiers, literally in the Hebrew, the word soldiers in there, it's just they. But they, those other ones, not me, took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal. And here's the quintessential verse. But Samuel replied, Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. To obey is better than sacrifice. And Saul is rejected as king. Now on Wednesday, I actually want to look at the one that God appointed in his place, who goes by the name of David, and look at a transition period before David fully takes the throne and Saul steps off of it, and watch the jealous interactions of Saul and the way that he slowly descends into like this demonic spiral of jealousy and insecurity, which is going to be fun, fun for me. I don't know about you. But here and now, this is the moment of his rejection. And I think probably the most pertinent question that we can ask here this morning is how? How did this happen? How did Saul fail so bad? And asking this question is what the Bible is almost begging us to do, leading us to do. Because what's easy to do is just pin Saul to a wall. What's easy to do is just look at Saul as if he's the king of this nation, having direct access to this amazing prophet Samuel, as if he's such an idiot for doing something so stupid. Having a God that has rescued his people from slavery out of Egypt, provided for them all along the way, defeated giant after giant after giant in the land, and now here he is compromising with God over a few sheep and cows. It's easy to criticize him, but the more you criticize him, the Bible will do this little ninjutsu sort of little trick here. The more it gets you to condemn Saul for his idiocy and his stupidity, the more it's going to reveal to you a mirror where you can see yourself a little bit more clearly. How is it that Saul fell? It's the same reason that you and I on micro and macro levels fall all the time. He is us in so many ways. How did Saul fall? Well, if we were to put it in maybe a categorical idea, as simply as I know how, for sure, Saul sinned. He disobeyed. Disobedience, I get it. But how? How did that come about? And there's one concept that seems to come to my mind more than any other, and that's the simple idea of self-deception. Self-deception. Do you know there's only two people that know you from the inside? Your thoughts, feelings, and motives. That'd be you and that'd be God. And what human beings have an amazing creativity and power at doing is deceiving ourselves and therefore distorting the view of how God sees us. Because if we can deceive ourselves, somehow that's related to deceiving God. If I say I'm doing things for the right reasons and motives, or I have good cause or justification to make the decisions that I am, then surely God sees and knows the same and everything's fine. But self-deception is not just a religious or a Christian or a biblical sort of concept. It's a human experience. In fact, there's an article in The Atlantic written by Arthur Brooks when he talked about self-deception. The article is entitled, "Quit Lying to Yourself." And he says this: everyone self-deceives, but that does not make it harmless. How many times have you heard that excuse? Well, everybody's doing it. To which every parent in the room knows, well, if everyone was jumping off a cliff, would you go and do the same? Everyone self-deceives, but that does not make it harmless. Self-deception at high levels is actually associated with poor mental health because it's a departure from reality. And mental health, one of the definitions of it is a commitment to reality at all costs. And so once you've bought into any level of self-deception, it tends to be a downward spiral where your vision and view of yourself starts to become increasingly disconnected from reality, and this starts to have a greater and greater descent, even in terms of our mental and emotional well-being. Now, at moderate levels, he says, it can temporarily protect the self-deceiver from bad feelings, but it still presents a barrier to the deep well-being that comes from living with integrity. To be really happy, says Arthur, we must learn to be completely honest with ourselves. And I don't know if we couldn't just immediately substitute in there the concept of not just being honest with ourselves. I think there is a fine, if not invisible, line between being honest with ourselves and being honest with God. The one thing that Saul never did. Now, you want to compare Saul to David as just an example. David, the one that God did not reject, but actually appointed as the one through whom Jesus would come, he also failed, majorly and massively. So what's the difference? The difference was when it came time to have his sin called out, David repented. There wasn't a level of self-deception in him that just doubled down on his false motives, but he actually came clean. So God's not looking for perfect people, but he is looking for people who are willing to live in reality at all costs, even when that reality says really bad things about you. I remember, this was many moons ago, back when your boy was in college, and I remember I was on my senior tour. So it was my last year of college, and life was going really great at that point, and I just had to finish up a few credits that were kind of just hangers-on. I'd done all the hard stuff, so it's just a few remaining final credits. And I took one particularly easy class. I won't mention which category it is, because some of you might be actually majoring in that category, and I don't want to bash it as being a meaningless degree that you're getting. Even though. But in this particular class, the final project was a big presentation, a big oral presentation everyone had to make. Now, I was crushing this class. It wasn't that hard for me, and I was so far ahead of the game that long before the final project was due, I was done with it. Done with it. Easy peasy. And so in the final 2 weeks of class, the professor came up and said, everyone needs to sign up for their slot to present their project. Now, make sure you present carefully. If you are struggling with it, make sure you pick a slot that's near the end of the time so you give yourself enough time to finish. If you're really nervous about it, maybe you pick one of the front slots so that you can get it out of the way. And as she was talking, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm already done. Why don't I let everyone else go first, pick whatever slot they want, and I'll just be the nice guy. Now, her command was very clear. Everyone sign up today for a slot. I did not. And so when I showed up next week and I was not on the calendar for presentation, she said I was going to be unable to present because I didn't obey. What I wanted to say was, no, you don't know my heart. You don't know, I'm already done with my presentation. I was trying to be nice. But I did not do what she asked me to do. And in the end, I actually created more headaches for her as a professor, trying to find her own personal time to accommodate my presentation, which she didn't have to do. But how easy it is to slip into a self-justifying, self-deceiving mode. I'm doing right here. It's okay if I don't have to do what everyone else is doing. Self-deception operates that way. And in the particular case of Saul, it operates in a very religious way. And here's what I mean about religious. Religious can be a generic term to describe religious things very generally. But oftentimes in Christian circles like ours, we'll use it negatively. And what we mean by religious, it means selfishness cloaked in spirituality. Selfishness cloaked in spirituality. Meaning, I'm obeying God, sort of. But I'm doing it ultimately for me, not him. And this is how Saul rolled. And so how do you justify disobeying God about not taking all the sheep and cattle? Easy. I just risked my life. I just led men into battle. Look at what a great leader I am. You are the one that called me. You found me. I didn't find you in the first place, first of all. So I've done all these great things for you. Surely this is just a small thing I can take for me. And you just rationalize it. You just rationalize it. And as one psychologist I went to one time, humans are never at their most creative when it comes to rationalizing their own decisions. We are so good at it. You will experience it every time you're in traffic in a larger city. That every moment because you're from a small town that doesn't have much traffic and you don't have the proper driving experience, and you cut someone off because you didn't merge at the appropriate time or didn't know your exit until it was late, you will cut someone off and think to yourself, you know what, I'm just trying to get where I'm going. I'm just doing my best. I'm just trying to follow Google Maps. But then the second someone else does it to you, that selfish POS. Where did they learn how to drive? It's the human inclination. The human inclination to find justification for ourselves and condemnation for others. And it's so powerfully prominent in Christian circles, in religious circles. Why? Because religion is this age-old idea that my obedience is not because I love God and I'm grateful to him, but my obedience is actually to compel God to help me how I want him to. Obedience is what puts God in my debt. And some of you may be like, I don't know that I think like this. Trust me, we all think like this. It's so much easier to justify whatever sin you struggle with when you feel like, man, I've had a good streak on my Bible app lately. I was pretty nice to my wife a month ago. I tithed, not an actual tithe tenth, but I gave something. And then all of a sudden, what we do that the Bible might call sin, or what Jesus would even call disobedience, even if it's not some categorical biblical sin, is rationalized. And then our obedience also becomes this place where, man, if I obey enough, especially when times are good or times are bad, it's an insulation when times are good, that God has to help me and keep me from times getting bad. And when times are bad, it's my security and protection that God will act on my behalf. It's this quid pro quo sort of relationship. That if I do this for you, you are obligated to do something for me. And you know what? There is nothing more disgusting outside looking in than religion. Some of you know all about this. Some of you grew up in very religious in the negative sense contexts. I have friends that have grown up in maybe hyper-fundamentalist camps, or sometimes in Catholic expressions, sometimes even non-Christian expressions that also take on this very form and pattern. And so the idea is I essentially do whatever I want to do, but I just pay my little religious tithe through confession or church attendance or a Bible study or something like that, or saying a prayer of some kind, thinking that that somehow balances the universe out. And all the time we feel like we're justified and we're okay. It's not like I'm forgetting about God and I'm doing the bare things I feel like he wants me to do, but it enables me to have enough room to feel okay about the things that I want to do. So I never have to repent. I never have to be holy. I never have to give my entire life to God. I just have to do just enough to make sure my quid pro quo side of the relationship is upheld. But you know what? Some of you know exactly what that looks like. And it's why you're really not a fan of even being here this morning. It's why you're not even a fan of church in general. Because the stench of religion, the hypocrisy behind it, is so off-putting that you just don't want anything to do with it. And when you're around particularly religious people, it's so obnoxious. They're so self-righteous. You can see right through them. You can see them giving themselves a pass on all kinds of things that you know are ridiculous. But They do so because simply like, well, I've raised my hands in worship, or because my attendance has been flawless, or whatever self-rationalization comes to their mind. And then when it comes to confront them on any negative information about themselves, it's defensiveness, it's blame shifting, it's doubling down on the false reality of self-deception I came in with. Well, you don't know how hard I've had it. Why am I on the 5th job in 4 months? Man, it was just politics at that other place, man. I tell you, it's favoritism. My boss didn't know what he was doing. He was an idiot. And we have all these stories that we tell ourselves to somehow insulate us from the reality of hey, you're wrong. Hey, you're in sin. Hey, you are violating relationship with God and possibly others. But here's the beautiful redemptive story, not just of Saul, but where we even come to Jesus, who was our true king, very unlike Saul. That because of his perfect obedience, there wasn't some quid pro quo, if I obey God, then he'll bless me, but feeling so radically blessed by God, desired to just love him in return. You and I can live by a very, very different pattern, which is not just religion, but it's a genuine relationship. A genuine relationship where I obey God because I love God. Not because I'm getting something from God. Not because I think I can put him in my debt. Because I know that he loves me. Deuteronomy chapter 7 makes it very clear when he speaks to the nation of Israel. He says, the Lord did not love you and choose you because you were more numerous than other peoples, for you are the fewest of all peoples. But it was because the Lord loved you that he chose you. You track the circular logic there? Why did God love his people? Because he loved his people. You tracking with this? Your brain's supposed to be melting a little bit, not just the sun, the spiritual power and weight of my words. Why does God love you? Is it because you're tall and handsome? Is it because you're intelligent? Is it because you're very spiritual and powerfully spiritually gifted? Is it because you've got wealth and resources that you're very happy to be generous with? Why is it exactly that the Lord loves you? And you know what? He makes it very, very clear. The Lord loves you because he loves you. Fellas, if your wife ever asks you, honey, why do you love me? Just know the test of the millennium has just entered your presence. And the next words that you choose could very well be life and death. If I love you because you're beautiful, or I love you because you're funny, or I love you because you're a great life partner to go do fun things with, or I love you because of any other category, other than just the commitment and my will to love you, beauty fades, joy can go down, someone being fun and happy to be around doesn't always exist 24/7. Every category that you say you love someone can go away, and then what then? It's not a secure relationship. But when you love someone because you love someone, when you love someone because you love someone, because you love someone not because of their character or their qualities, but because of the inner commitment and character that you brought into the relationship, that's what God does for his people. That's what he does for us. And what does that do for us? It doesn't just fill you with warm fuzzies to make you feel better. It gives you the courage to face deep, painful truths about yourself. Why you take shortcuts. Why you come to church once every 6 weeks. Why you have a hard time reading your Bible. Why you can barely scrap out a conversation with God. It's not just because no one's ever told you how. There's something deeper going on. There's a self-reliance. There's a pride. There's a pain. There's a self-protection. And we all got it. I'm not pointing you out as if I'm immune. But once we are freed from self-deception, from having to create this own narrative about ourselves, that somehow everything that we do is justified because of our own creative rationalization, now we're free to hear truth and have a commitment to reality. And that reality comes in the form of Jesus Christ, who is the perfect expression of the image of God. And when our lives line up to him, guess what? You're not always going to feel great about you. Because I don't look like him most of the time. But I don't have to run away from that, or hide from that, or blame someone else for that, or blame the church on that, or blame anyone else, blame the government for that. I don't have to blame the devil for that. I don't have to blame anyone else for that, because I get to stand right in Jesus' face, because he loves me because he loves me. I say, all right, tell me all about it. Because I'd rather be in relationship with you than continue my religious charade. Saul has a lot to say to us. A lot to say to us. And if you struggle on any level with this religious game, welcome to the club. Anyone that doesn't struggle at all with religion, that's just all into rebellion and nothing about religion, ain't here this morning. But if you struggle at all with religion, I've got better news for you. His name is Jesus, and he loves you because he loves you. And he died for you, not because you earned it. And the grace that he offers you is not based on what you can do for him. And so therefore, there's a vulnerability that we can have in his presence. And all self-deception can be thrown away in favor of truth. And that truth can bring healing. That everything you pretend you're about could just be a mask for the real pride in your soul. And the closer you walk with Jesus, the more obvious it becomes for me. I can hide behind Bible verses. I can hide behind my own intentions of what I think they are. I can hide behind the narratives I've created of how I'm the victim, or I'm just the empathetic one, or I just have the compassion, or I'm just trying to do what I think. And in reality, Jesus says, well, will you obey me? Will you follow me? Will you trust me? Will you obey me? Will you follow me? Will you trust me? Will you obey me when it doesn't feel good? Will you obey me when it doesn't make you popular? Will you trust me when it actually takes you to a place that's scary instead of happy? These are the things that God is working out in us.